Welcome to the Three Voices podcast. Today, our topic is grief. Is our experience of it? What have we learned about it? What do we want to share with folks? What questions do we have for each other? Um, very important part of living. And as we get on in years, I at least have found that I've lost a number of people very dear to me, and so I'm no stranger to grief. So with that, I'd like to open it up. And Thomas, you just mentioned that a dear friend lost their wives and is dealing with grief. So it's a timely topic. It's a very rich one, and I think this should be an interesting conversation. Anybody want to
Want
open
to
it
kick
up?
it off, Thomas? You had a recent event that you were sharing.
Part of what I'm thinking is where does grief actually reside inside us? Because when we're experiencing grief, if we look around, we are the only one experiencing it in terms of how we feel about it. It's inside us. So what is it inside us that what can we do inside ourselves to not necessarily make the grief go away because it really doesn't do that, but to minimize its negative effects or its hurtful, debilitatory effects on us. So one of the things that I keep thinking of is that we kind of have two realities we live in. One is our head through which we view the world, and then the world itself outside of us. So the world outside of us, when we're having grief, is not going to be experiencing the grief that we have inside. So if we put more attention, if we can, put more attention on what is external to us, then the grief will have less of an impact on us in the moment we're in. There would be a way to start. I know in the grief that I've experienced, it's just really difficult to hold that back and not be seeing the world through that grief. But in fact, the rest of the world is, or most of the rest of the world certainly is not feeling that grief. So it's just in us. So we can decide how much of it we want to bear.
I couple of things. Um, I'm not sure why one would want to manage it, quote unquote, or reduce its presence in our experience. I have found it to be useful to allow it to be there and to let it kind of wash over me and morph over time, which it does do. Um, and I've come to the conclusion that the length of time I experienced grief, let's say over my brother passing, for example, or my parents passing, or other friends, uh, can be quite long, and it pops up in very interesting ways. So I'm an advocate of let it flow. Don't force it. Don't think it has to be put into a box of duration, of kind, of eliminating it, but let it flow. I found that to be useful. And I do have an experience that outside us, it's kind of inside us and outside of us, people might not even know it's happening to us. But recently, a few weeks ago, a friend of mine passed after a long series of illnesses. And we had a ceremony on the top of a mountain where we remembered him. And that was to be a sharing of grief. And I have found that to be um, very useful, like very rich and valuable, is to share it and not hold it inside, but share it with others who either are going through it also because they had their own relationship with him, or they may have not know him, but they've had something similar happen, and there could be a sharing of grief.
Yeah. The first question really want to get into is the proverbial one we almost always get into, and that's a definition of the term. I'm not sure I totally understand grief. Rob, we both lost our youngest brother over the course of the last few years, and certainly that's a traumatic one. Certainly, when parents pass, for many of us, it's a traumatic thing as well. But the question that I'll bring up is how are we defining grief? Is grief to me sounds like a very negative term.
Mm.
Okay. That it's impacting our quote, being here now.
Mm.
When you have grief, you are recollecting something and you are not, quote, being here now. And you're not, you may not, okay, I don't want to say what anyone else is thinking, but one may not really, one really may not need to feel negative, to feel grief at all. Okay. Uh, Certainly the loss of a loved one, okay, is something that is traumatic, okay, but it is something that's be here now. They're not here anymore. And so, to me, the way I've handled it always is I accept the fact that their physical body isn't here next to me or in contact with me, but their life is. You know, I recollect things. I think like you called it a grief sharing, Rob. I think I would eliminate the word grief just on my side, but the event of sharing is a very good one. You see, to me, that I'm sure people there were sad, okay, and I'm sure some were crying, okay, but they were really there to celebrate this man, to acknowledge that whether he was famous or just one of us, he's moving on to another place and another time, and that I have pictures of my parents and family that I see almost every day. And, I can say, hey, Pop, how are you? And I literally do not let sadness enter into my, again, if you will, call it a grieving process. Um, in very religious Judaism, uh, there's the belief that, especially when it's apparent, that the way to live your life is do everything what you thought, or you lived it with your parent because they're still there in spirit. And so, your friend Rob, my friend, by the way, Chuck, we won't get into it, but from way back when, I don't want to mention last names, so he's not a particular person, but Chuck that we grew up with, went to college with, was one of my best friends. Passed just a couple months ago.
I'm having trouble placing Chuck.
Albany, your grade, 1 year, you're older than me. He lived in New York. Uh, oh, he shares my last name. Okay, not spelled the same way, but in you will know who I'm talking about. Not that he was a close friend of yours or ours future, but
Okay.
but
Okay.
he wound up moving 2 miles from me, and lived literally where I did for 30 years. But the whole idea of grief bothers me. I like the idea of celebrating a life. And, one of the mantras that I say, uh, you know, every day, or a piece of, or a line of, is only through death do we achieve immortality.
Yeah.
And that it's just a passing on. Everything has its time under the sun. And if we expect to be free and independent, if you will, enlightened people, we accept the fact that we all have only so much time on this planet, and that hopefully, you think about some movie stars, or musicians, or people that really changed the world. I always think about Yogananda. He was one of the most enlightened minds, but he passed at 56 years old. And some, pop stars and people that, are household names died of drug overdoses, or conditions caused in their 30s and 40s. And so everyone has their time. We have to recognize that and accept that, and then say, I'll miss them. But then again, I won't entirely, because they're still here with me.
I don't think that grief is a negative. You said it was a negative thing. I don't think it's
Okay.
a negative at all. I mean,
Okay.
it's a natural emotion. It's a complex emotion. It's multifaceted response to loss. It doesn't have to be loss of a person. It could be the loss of a limb, or a loss of one's health in some way, loss of a job, and the feeling palette, if you will, is complex. It evolves and morphs. It includes acceptance, but it also includes anger. It can include anger, guilt, um, intense sadness. And to call those things that are, I regard as quite natural, negative, is, I think, a mislabeling of what they are, and gets in the way of moving through grief in a healthy way.
Well, that's what I'm thinking though right here, that it is negative, to me, because grief, as it seems to be defined, first off, is an emotion. And it's emotion that, if I might steal a thought or two from you, Thomas, that definitely, I said it a little few minutes ago, but I'll echo it again, is it prevents you from being here now. It's something that's tying you to a set of emotional responses. Recognizing loss and being, sad. Okay, sad to me is not grief, but the idea that, again, we're talking about, and we talk in our little sessions here, it's how, not what's best for everyone, but how does an enlightened person handle these kinds of losses?
But I don't
And
understand, Rick. I don't understand why you say that experiencing emotion is not in the present. To me, emotions come up in the present. That's the only place they could come up.
no,
And
I'm
and
sorry.
and so I think it's when you try to say, I don't want to experience that emotion. I want to accept what happened, is one is forcing oneself out of the present where that emotion resides, into some state based on desire or preference that you think ought to be there instead.
Well, what should be there instead is no effect on your present reality. Even the great loss. And I won't tell you I don't have a tear, or that I never felt totally in control. I could tell you that when my brother passed, he was in a coma for 2, 3 months, closer to, 2.5, whatever. But and I was there 5 days a week. but it wasn't like sadness. It was, as long as there's a chance that he's not done yet with this life, I'm going to be there and try to help that. And when it came time to make the decision, and the family had it too, that I was overruled, by the way, by most of the family, that they decided to pull the plug.
Mhm.
You know, that is an extremely, and can be an extremely traumatic experience. It's not like someone just dying. In certain ways, pulling the plug, where making that decision, it's his time to go, and so that was exceptionally hard. But what I did? I told 100 stories to 100 people about funny things and good things that my brother did and that I shared with him. He did a lot of crazy things, okay? But yeah, as we will attest to. And Thomas, you never knew him, but it would have been tough to keep up with him. This was a true wild fellow of the soul. But again, when my parents passed, I just realized it was their time, and so I get the way you're explaining it, Rob. I don't think one is right and one is wrong. I think when you deal with this subject, it is extremely personal, but from an enlightened point of view, you have to accept that life's made the decision to move them forward, okay, into another place and time. And you didn't just love a body, you loved a person, because you didn't live with that guy. You didn't live with your brother. Okay. I mean, at the end, of course, we did grow up that way, but they were there with you even when they weren't there with you. And now they're just on an extended trip. They're just not calling in right now, but they're still there with you.
I agree
And
with that
so,
for sure.
yeah.
I could experience that a lot. I have conversations with my brother,
Well, there you go. I mean, that's even deeper.
late, or
Does he answer back?
yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, but that's okay.
Uh,
That's okay. Son, I just want to say one quick thing. It's a very, I don't know if it's a dopey point, but I'll make it anyway. The reason I asked you was really to hear an honest answer. And one of the things that I notice in many of the popular TV shows is, I'll even say one like Dexter. Dexter, if we all saw it, he talks to his dead father on a routine basis.
yeah.
And they actually show their conversation back and forth. And, you know, I can honestly say, I've said a couple times, "Hey, Pop, what do you think about this one?" Okay, but he hasn't answered. Okay, and the idea is, do I think he's heard it? Yeah, I do. I think he might hear this right now. I think Peter may be hearing that right now. Larry may be hearing this right now. Peter and Larry Thomas are our brothers, and so let's get you into it, Thomas. I mean, how is the passing of a dear friend like that, affecting you?
No, I think what you guys have said is really helpful. My thinking about it has to do with letting it pass through us. It's like any kind of, like, for example, if you're insulted, what in us is insulted? It's usually our ego. I mean, what else is insulted? I mean, our bones aren't insulted. Our planning is not insulted. I mean, ego is what is insulted. And so, like in Blunt, one of the main issues is to try and get people to go back past whatever insults them to something higher, which for us is present awareness, being more enlightened in the moment we're in. So it seems to me, after listening to you guys, how I would like to think about this is how to experience it, because it is, like you said, Rob, it is in the present when it hits us. but we hold on to it longer than we need to, which puts it in the past. So then we're out of the present if we hold on to it. But how do we let it pass through us? Like, feel it, know that we've had the loss that we've had, but let it pass through and get on to the next moment, because the next moment is again fresh. It's a whole new world, moment after moment.
Mhm.
Do we want to be do we want to be missing the next moment over grief in the past? Because it is past tense. So do we want to keep hanging on to it or let it pass through us?
But I think part of letting it pass through you is to experience it. And
Yeah,
so, and so I think it's self-judgmental,
uh,
potentially judgmental of others to say, get, I'm exaggerating, you didn't quite frame it this way, but get over it. It's time to move on.
well,
Who,
then
who
this
are you
is a
to say that? Who are you to judge the duration of grief that one experiences?
I didn't. I'm sorry. It wasn't. My thinking is that, I mean, how whenever it comes up, it's not that it goes away, does it? Because you're reminded, like you said, so you're doing something, remember the person, and so on. But whenever it comes up, it's going to, in a sense, force us into the present. But then, if we hold on to it, then we lose the present. So whenever it comes up, was what I,
Right.
because it's going to keep coming up, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
like this. Their
That's
friend,
the key point, Thomas.
yeah, because their friend has lost his wife, and I know that he's suffering, and each time it comes up, rather than let it pass through him in that moment and use it to wake himself up, he's holding on to it and feeling the loss rather than
Right,
the.
right.
I mean, this
And
is
that,
It gets to the point of how does one let it pass through?
just be more in the present, because it's not actually in the present in terms of the external world. It's only inside, right? So,
I
but
want,
then
yeah,
when it comes up, instead of focusing on the internal loss that one is recognizing in that moment, put one's attention on what is happening outside oneself where it doesn't exist. And that will let it pass through. And it will, let's say it lasts for what, 2 minutes. And then the grief will come back because you'll think of the person again, or you notice something that reminds you of the person, and the grief comes back. So when it comes back again, let it pass through you through being more attentive to what's in the present around you at the time.
Well, that's
and I
one.
think it's
I
very,
was going to say that that's one way to do it. There's
Yeah.
there's many ways to do it. You described the one way to do it, which is diverting the attention to something else where in which that grief is not present. But there are other ways to let go
the
of it.
grief does not have to be present. You see, that's the difference. Okay. And here's the thing. You have to accept what is. And then you get, a line from AA that we all have heard probably 1,000 times, God help me change the things that I can. Okay. And that's why they're in AA. But also help me
Accept
know
you
the
can
things that I cannot.
and
So
have the
you
wisdom
cannot bring
and
them back. What?
have the wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah.
And that finishes it. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So that's exactly what I'm saying. So grief is you're saying, well, you're allowed to have it. Of course you're allowed, but it's not positive.
I
Okay.
agree.
Grief is
That's
not
what I disagree.
celebratory. What?
I disagree. I disagree
How
that
can something that make you feel bad be positive?
because that is the reality.
Uh,
That is the
No,
reality.
no,
That's
no.
that's that's what's present, and to push it away, saying, "Nah, that this is bad. I don't want to experience this anymore." I don't think that's
No, no, but see, that's the way you're interpreting what I'm saying and apparently what Thomas is saying. We're not saying or feeling any different than you for the loss of a dear person. But what we're saying is grieving isn't helping me or them. Okay. What I want to do is celebrate them. What I want to do is remember them when I want to remember them. I don't want to sit around, okay, and mourn them. A mourning period, okay, it's got some validity, and that's basically because the general public of a family or friend wants to go and comfort the family, like sitting shiva in Judaism, or going to a wake in Christian circles. You are trying to share the feelings and emotions of the family, but you're also there to say, celebrate their life. A dear friend passed just literally last week, and I was saying to my friend, you really did not have or do not have the grave loss, because he was taking it very bad, that you think you have, because your father would not have wanted you to feel this way. He would have wanted you to say, okay, this is another thing that happened, and everything we've ever talked about and did together isn't going to change. We did it. We're here. Okay. And now, Rob, I moved on. I'm not here. Okay. But you're here, and everything we did is here. And so to me, by grieving, we're slowing or stopping that process of, quote, flowing through. And I agree with Thomas. The last point is that when you do grieve, you're not in the present. Okay. You are now being controlled by an emotion that perhaps you select and want to have that emotion. Okay. But you are not in control. You are not celebrating their lives. You're sad they're gone. Don't be sad they're gone. Be happy you had the pleasure of being with them when they were here.
Okay, so I like the notion of celebrating. That is, I think
Yeah,
that is well, something I've done. Something like when we were had the memorial for Jeff, we were celebrating his life and what we
exactly.
remember of Jeff, and not only doing it myself, but hearing other people do it, I think was very valuable. But
Yep.
grief. Have you heard of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross?
Say the name?
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
No, I have not.
She has what is probably the most widely known and appreciated models of grief. Grief as a process, not a linear process, but a process in which one goes through different stages. Again, not linearly, so
Yep.
don't take me.
I understand the concept.
Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance.
Right.
And so it's kind of a map of the territory. So and so I'm a big proponent of understanding the map of the territory and being able to observe where in the territory one is as one goes through the process of grief.
But that also assumes, and while I don't know the person you talk about, I've certainly heard that kind of theory before, and that grieving is a process. Okay. But again, it's not it's not in alignment with my thinking, because again it's again going through these different emotions, allowing what it is saying, that's of value in my opinion, Rob, is that it's okay to grieve. And I want to make that clear. It is okay to grieve. When I say you're not in control or it's not the way I handle it, doesn't mean that that's the way anyone else should handle it. Okay? That if someone is overstruck by the loss, okay, no, you don't want to make that grimace like you did and say, oh, that's it, forget about them. They're gone. Yeah. No, we're not saying that. Okay, we're saying that if you need to go through that process, do it. Okay, but if you want to know how to control it a little bit more and how not to feel that pain, because that grieving process takes you through pain. Okay, I say eliminate the pain part. Okay, celebrate the joy and remember them in the, as if they were next to you. Okay, you don't have to grieve. You don't have to grieve. If you do, that's okay. But again, you don't have to be enlightened. One doesn't have to be smart. One doesn't have to, be healthy. We make the choices about how we want to handle our world. And that's my thought.
I
Yeah.
I
Mm.
there's a lot of nuance there.
Right?
I I uh I don't I think the notion of controlling the process
Yeah. You
is
don't really like that word, Rob.
I don't like it because I think it comes from an ego response that prevents one from an enlightened point of view.
No.
Control.
Control does not have anything to do with the ego. In fact, it's the loss of control
Who is
that
it? Who is it that is controlling? Who is it that thinks
me, the soul,
that
me,
something
the
ought to be
spirit.
controlled?
I'm giving you the answer. Me, the
Okay.
soul, the spirit, not an ego. In other words, I recognize the unity of all things and the sanctity and sacredness of life, and that living is, in the physical world, pratiki, just it's one of the cycles we go through, and we accept that if that's our belief. And again, my thoughts are there to help people, Thomas, like we're talking about, to help people get through that process, Rob, quicker or almost immediately. Okay. You feel the sadness. When I heard my friend passed, okay, my wife told me, just as a matter of fact, by the way, do you know that? Boom. I went, oh, I took a deep breath. I felt, a tear coming to my eye. And then I said, but we had many great times together. And unfortunately for this particular fellow, he was fighting cancer for so many years. And in fact, his passing was in its way the right time and blessing at that point.
A relief.
Yeah, it was a relief.
Like
But
Jeff
but
was a relief because he was
but
okay.
control is a very important thing we have to talk about because you are a student of the flow. And by the way, so am I. I totally agree on flow. Okay. And the life and understanding and that is we don't want to stagnate anywhere anyhow. And that's what I'm actually saying about in regards to grief. And that's what it sounded like you said, Tom. Thomas didn't say forget about them, just said you got to move on. Right now, they're not here, but I can think about them lovingly anytime I want. But right now, I have to paint something right now. And I shouldn't stop that. A closing thought on my little longer diatribe, because we picked an interesting subject. I'll never forget the day I was 13 years old. We buried my grandmother, my mother's mother, and we were in Roslyn then.
I knew naughty.
Yes, you knew Naughty, and we came back around 1 o'clock, 1:30. I changed because it was a summer or spring, time, and I had my basketball in the hand, and I was running out, taking a few shots outside. We had a basketball hoop. We were going to go play, and my mother came running out, yelling at me, "How dare you!" How do you know we just buried your grandmother, a few hours ago? And I looked at her and I said, well, Mom, I was there. Okay. what do you want me to do now? You say, I'm going out and I'm playing basketball. Should I sit at home and cry? What should I do? I honor my grandmother my own way. Okay, still remembering her stories right now. But I'll never forget that day, and she couldn't answer me. She goes, "Oh, go ahead, go play basketball," and I
Yeah,
did.
I mean, um, you remind me of something. This notion of, moving on. Um, I've seen a couple of guys I know who had a girlfriend at one point in their lives whom they really loved,
Yeah,
and they lost the girlfriend, typically to the girlfriend saying, "I don't want to be with you anymore," right?
whatever the reason. Okay.
That's a loss. And what
Uh,
I've seen with them is a multiple, literally multiple decades of holding on to that grief of that relationship loss to the point where they fail to engage in other relationships.
Oh no.
Bob, that's a very, 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 that's what I wanted to define earlier. I don't want you to go too far off on the track. A loss of a limb, you brought that up earlier, a loss of a job, okay? No, that's not grief, okay?
That's
Said, what we're talking about grief is losing someone.
no, no, no,
A
but it is,
girlfriend
it is.
breaking up with
I
you,
disagree with that strongly. It's not the thing that happened. It's not the category of loss. It is the experience of loss that is all about grief. He is grieving the loss of his girlfriend. That is real.
except that she's still alive. He could go back to her. She could change her mind.
Yes,
Uh,
all that. But what I
but
guess
you can't do that when someone dies.
I know that's true. That's true. There are some distinctions to be made. My point is just that he is he has never the grief is still driving him decades
You,
later.
you know what I say about that? It's very sad.
It is.
Grow
It
up.
is. But that's why I bring it
No,
up.
grow up. That's what I say to someone.
But
Grow up because you
yeah,
could not change
but but
the.
but I'm saying people have said that to him. This is where I'm trying to get to
Yeah.
is what is he failing to do eh, in terms of why is he holding on to this feeling of grief for decades and he's not doesn't seem to be able to let it go.
No,
Well,
this is
because most likely he has mental disease.
no, no. Let me put in here, if
What
I
is
could.
that?
No, there is an identity attachment that occurs with grief. This is one of the reasons, or
Yes.
not grief, anything that we find identity in, we hold on to because we're afraid of losing our identity. And so the best thing, at least it seems to me, it's very helpful, as we talked earlier, to let it pass through us when it comes up. It's not that we don't recognize it or feel it, but you let it pass through you because what else can you do? Like you said, Rick, you
Yeah,
have to play. I mean, what else can you do? You
that's
can
right.
hold on to it and derive more and more identity out of it and sink yourself deeper into the remorse, or you can smell the coffee, look outside, see your friends, something. I mean, we have a choice when we're experiencing grief to hold on to it and derive an identity from it and give it more life inside ourselves or let it pass through us. It's going to keep coming up, but every time it comes up, let it pass through rather than holding on to it. This is basically all I'm saying.
I agree with that.
And it's dead. It's dead on. It's right on. It's right on. Dead on. You have to let it go through. Your friend, seriously, Rob, has a mental illness.
He does. But
Yeah.
but but mental illnesses can be healed.
Oh, yes, they could. Of course, they
And
could. I didn't say forget about him.
what I'm searching for is,
But
and
there's a weakness or missingness in his soul. You see, he doesn't know himself. He pictures himself as a function of that woman.
He
at that
does.
person.
He
And he
does.
needs to say, that person did not make my life. Okay? That person is not me. And it wasn't right for me because whether I loved her or not, she didn't love me. And so I have to accept that. And I won't accept reality. I won't accept that. And by the way, he might have been the nicest, bestest boyfriend in the world. And she might have been an evil woman. She might have been someone that was not really telling him the truth. Maybe going out with him, he's got money. Maybe he's a, good
Sure.
looking guy. Whatever it was, she could have been using him. Could have. I don't know that. Or maybe he isn't a nice guy. But the point is, be here now. She's gone. You have to accept that.
It's almost though that the thing that was exposed by for him by her loss is something that was it's almost like it was something that he was like talk about ego attachment that
Yeah,
he was not willing to look at in himself and her
right.
leaving him pinpointed that like some other trauma that happened earlier and he's unable to come to grips with it so like the trauma of losing her was
Right.
basically another instance of some other childhood trauma that he's never been able to get past.
Well,
Hmm.
there you go. And mental illness is very real. I'm not downplaying that at all. Okay. And there are different ways of schools of thought of how to deal. Sometimes it's pure medication. I know people, very beautifully intelligent, wonderful men and women who can't control their anxiety without a pill.
Hmm.
And, some of them, they shared with me, people would even be shocked that they're, people of that stature. I mean, you take whatever you would call those. I don't even know what they, Xanax, whatever it is. But the point is, okay, that's a way to deal with it because your particular physical body can't control those emotions. And that's okay because it could be because of a medical imbalance. And therefore, drugs are using it. So maybe this person should look at that too. And then, of course, there's counseling, grief counseling, and there is. And then that kind of counseling, loss counseling, if you will, in it. But the most shocking time I could give you a little bit personal. I got divorced after 6.5 years. Okay, and I knew I was going to get divorced for about a year and a half before, but I was waiting for timing, particularly for my son to just age a little more before we left. Okay, meaning I wanted him to be, almost 3 or 4 years, between 3 and 4 years old, not 2 years old. And the thing that got me, and I was much younger then, 30 years old, maybe 29 years old. Um, I actually had palpitations. I went to the hospital twice, emergency room, thinking I had a heart attack. And Rob, guess where the last one was? It was in Denver, Colorado, where
Oh,
I
really?
was on business and I was in my hotel, and like 3 o'clock in the morning, I couldn't take it. I walked downstairs and said, "Listen, I don't want to call an ambulance. How far is the hospital? Can I get can I yeah, can I get a ride to the hospital?" And what's the matter? I go, "Oh no, no, we'll get someone. We'll get someone right away." And so they got me there, and I got in about 4 a.m. in the morning. And they did all the tests. And at 7 o'clock, the doctor came in and gave me, for lack of a better word, I'm going to say, because it was 40 years ago, um, gave me a pack of Quaaludes. And I said, whatever the legitimate term was then, but Valium, that's what it was. Gave me a pack of Valium. And I said, what's that for? He goes, look, we checked your history. They keep a general file. You came in twice in other places on this. You're stressing out, and you're stressing out, because you told me probably about the divorce, and literally it was. I was concerned as a foolish young man at that point. What's it going to be like for me now? I never lost. I never stopped anything. I made a commitment 6.5 years ago to marry her. Okay. And so he gave me the Valium, and this is the God's honest truth. You should take one and go back to sleep. Well, I didn't. And I went to my meeting somewhere at about 10:30, 11, and I had the Valium in my pocket. And I kept my hand in the pocket for half the day so that I knew if I started getting anything, I'd take it. And I still have that pack of Valium in my drawer 40 years later to say I never took one because I learned that I was failing in control there. And having this crutch of the Valium in my pocket, okay, and I carried it for like 2, 3 weeks, and I never touched it. So you see, there's a lot of personal learning in this. I did learn a little bit more about life and enlightened living in the last 40 years. And that would never happen to me again today. If my wife came in totally surprised and said to me, I've had it, divorce, I'd be shocked. I'd be hurt. But then I'd say, well, why don't you meet me in Vegas next week? I'm out of here. No, well, not really. Not really that. But my point is, I wouldn't have the same reaction because I've learned a lot more. I'm the same human being, but I'm not, physically, but I'm not the same being. So
Right, right.
we're getting near the end of this run here
Yeah, it's a
today.
good conversation. I mean, there are many things one can do to whether it's grief or like
Right?
in your case, anxiety or depression or whatever, like getting through those things,
Right.
there are many things. Maybe that's a topic of another day, but this has been a good conversation. So I
Was.
would say let's let go of grief for now.
Yep.
And we look forward to hearing the response of our audience on this very important, interesting topic.
Very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.